There is a number that follows boring businesses everywhere they go. 90%. A 90% success rate. You have heard it about laundromats. You have heard it about storage units, about vending machines, about pest control routes. 9 out of 10 survive, the saying goes, while the exciting startups burn out and disappear. And here is the strange part. That number is real. It holds up, but it is quietly answering a question that almost nobody actually asked. Because 90% measures whether the business is still open after 5 years. That is all it measures. In plain terms, it mostly measures whether the owner kept up with the loan payments. It says nothing, not one thing, about whether that business ever made anyone a millionaire. Surviving and getting rich are two completely different numbers, and the distance between them is enormous. So here is the claim I am going to make, and I know how it sounds coming right after that. Most of the boring businesses that are famous for minting millionaires will keep you comfortable and will never make you rich. Only a few of them cross the line into real wealth. And there is exactly one variable that decides which side of that line you land on. I know how that sounds. Let me earn it. Picture two people. Both of them buy a boring business. Same category, same size, roughly the same result at the end of every month. About $4,000 in profit landing in each of their accounts after every single expense is paid. Identical cash flow. Now, let the clock run for 6 years. At the end of those 6 years, one of them has a net worth of nearly $680,000. The other one has just under $250,000. Same monthly profit, same effort. In fact, if anything, the second person probably worked a little harder, and yet the gap between them is more than $400,000. One is sitting on almost 3 times the wealth of the other. That gap did not come from luck. It did not come from hustle or discipline or some secret tactic. It came from one thing, and it is the single thing that almost every list of boring businesses leaves out. The first person owns an asset. The second person is the asset. That is the whole game. When you own a boring business, you are really choosing between two very different things that happen to look identical from the outside. Either there is something underneath the cash flow that grows in value and that you can one day sell, a building, a piece of land, a book of contracts that a buyer actually wants. Or there is nothing underneath it at all, and the money only exists as long as you personally keep showing up to make it. Same $4,000 a month. Opposite destinies. So before we touch a single business, let us be honest about what the word millionaire actually requires. It is not a big monthly income. Plenty of people earn a good income and never build a dime of wealth. It is recurring cash flow, plus an asset underneath it that appreciates or sells, plus years of reinvesting instead of spending. Miss the middle ingredient, the asset, and you are not building wealth. You are just running on a treadmill that pays well. Every business in this video gets put through the same 3 questions, and I want you to keep them in your head as we go, because by the end they become a tool you can use on anything. Question 1. Do customers pay you at least once a month without you having to chase them? Question 2. Is each purchase low drama, small enough that nobody holds a family meeting to decide on it? And question 3. The one that does almost all the work. Can you eventually own or control the asset underneath the cash flow, and does that asset sell for a real multiple when you are done? The businesses that build millionaires pass all 3. The ones that are overhyped pass the first 2 and fall apart on the third. Watch how cleanly they split. Let us start where the hype is loudest. 4 boring businesses that get sold as millionaire makers, and I want to be fair here, because these are not scams. They can absolutely pay you a real income. But watch what happens to the millionaire math when there is nothing underneath the cash flow. The first is vending machines. The poster child for this entire misunderstanding. The pitch is money while you sleep. The reality is a route. The honest per machine profit, after the cost of the product, the commission to the location, fuel, and repairs, lands somewhere around $75 to $200 a month. To replace a normal salary, you need something like 25 machines, and at that point, you are not a passive investor. You are running a small logistics operation, driving, restocking, and fixing jams. And here is the killer detail. Say you build that route up to about $3,750 a month. When does your net worth hit $1 million? around 17 years. But look closely at how. The machines themselves are worth almost nothing when you are done. Every dollar of that million comes from taking the cash flow and investing it in the stock market for 17 years, which means the vending business is not the thing making you a millionaire. The index fund is. You could have earned the same money doing almost anything and saved it, and landed in the same place. The second is ATM routes. Same shape as vending, but thinner, and pushing straight into a headwind because the whole country keeps using less cash every year. You place machines, you keep them stocked with money, you collect a small fee per withdrawal. Fine as a side income. But there is nothing to sell at the end, the fee per machine is capped, and running the math, you are looking at more than 21 years to reach a million, again purely from investing the cash flow. No asset, no shortcut. The third is reselling and flipping. Sports cards, sneakers, whatever the hot category is this year. And this one is the clearest example of the trap, because it is not really a business at all. It is arbitrage. You buy low, you sell high, you pocket the difference. The moment you stop personally doing it, the income stops with you. There is no recurring customer, nothing that renews, and nothing a buyer would ever purchase from you because the whole thing lives inside your own effort and your own eye. At $3,000 a month reinvested, you would reach a million in around 21 years, and every cent of it, once again, comes from the market, not the flipping. The fourth is solo pressure washing or window cleaning. And I am putting it here on purpose because it is the perfect bridge into the second half of this video. On your own, this is a job you happen to own. Even at a strong $4,000 a month with no asset underneath it, you are looking at nearly 20 years to a million, carried entirely by whatever you manage to invest. But here is the turn. The instant you stop doing the work yourself and start running crews, signing recurring commercial contracts, and building a book of business, it stops being a job and quietly becomes a version of the recurring services business we are about to get to. Same trade. Completely different outcome. The only thing that changed is whether you built an asset or stayed the asset. And that turn, from being the asset to owning one, is exactly the door into the businesses that actually work. So here they are, the ones that earn the reputation. 5 boring businesses where the math genuinely does reach $1 million, and I will show you the honest timeline for each, not the fantasy one. The first is self-storage. This is the closest thing to a gold standard in this entire category. And the reason is simple. When you buy a storage facility, you are not really buying a storage business. You are buying real estate that happens to have tenants who pay you every month and almost never leave. People do not like letting go of their things. They tell themselves they will clear out the unit next month, and next month rarely comes. Run the real numbers. Say you buy a small facility for $900,000, put 30% down, and after the mortgage and every expense, you clear about $3,800 a month. That does not sound like a millionaire's income, and it is not. But the building is appreciating underneath you, the loan is being paid down every month, and you are reinvesting most of that cash flow. Put it all together and your net worth crosses $1 million at around the 8-year mark. Not from the cash flow alone, from the cash flow and the asset growing at the same time, stacked on top of each other. Let me make that tangible, because 8 years can sound like a magic trick until you see the moving parts. Your 30% down is $270,000 of equity on day 1. By year 5, between the loan shrinking and the building slowly appreciating, that equity has grown to around $500,000, and the cash flow you have quietly been reinvesting has become nearly $200,000 more. That is already close to $700,000 in net worth, and not one dramatic thing has happened. Give it 2 or 3 more years of the exact same boring machine, the loan getting smaller, the value creeping up, the reinvested cash compounding on itself, and you cross onto the far side of $1 million. Nothing exciting ever happened. That is the entire point. The second is car washes, and I mean the simple express kind, not some empire. Here is the trick most people miss. The wash is not the asset. The corner of real estate the wash sits on is the asset, and the monthly memberships are the cash flow that makes that real estate worth owning. This is the exact reason large investors have been quietly buying these up for years. The numbers are bigger, and so is the buy-in. Something like $1.4 million, 25% down, and let us stay conservative and say you clear $5,000 a month after the loan and everything else. With the land appreciating and memberships renewing on their own, the net worth math reaches $1 million in about 5.5 years. That is the fastest timeline on this entire list, and it is fast for one reason only: high recurring cash flow sitting on top of appreciating land. Cash flow and asset working together again. The third is recurring home services: pest control, heating and cooling, plumbing. The businesses nobody dreams about as a kid. What makes these powerful is not glamour, it is the contract. A signed monthly or quarterly agreement that renews automatically because no restaurant wants to fail a health inspection and no homeowner wants to babysit their own pipes. And here is the part that turns it into wealth. That book of contracts is itself an asset. Buyers will pay a real multiple for it, which is exactly why larger companies keep rolling these small operators up. Buy in around $400,000, 20% down, and at scale, you might clear $7,000 a month. The business itself grows in value as the contract book grows. Reinvest along the way, and you reach $1 million in a little under 9 years, with the sale value of the business doing a large share of the heavy lifting. The fourth brings us to a business people love to talk about: laundromats, but with the piece of the story that usually gets left out. Yes, the survival rate is genuinely high. That famous 95% number really does trace back to industry data. But survival is not the same as wealth, and here is where the asset question decides everything. Take the exact same laundromat, clearing the exact same $3,500 a month. If you only lease the storefront, if you own the machines but not the ground they stand on, your net worth does not cross $1 million until somewhere close to 16 years. But if you own the real estate underneath that same laundromat, the same profit, the same store, you get there in about 9.5 years. Same business. The property nearly cut the timeline in half. That is your proof in one comparison that with a laundromat, the million is in the building, not in the machines. The fifth is commercial cleaning. Not the act of cleaning, which is a job, but the company that holds the cleaning contracts, which is an asset. Office buildings, medical facilities, businesses that need the same recurring service week after week and would rather sign a contract than think about it. You scale it by adding crews, not by working more hours yourself. And the book of contracts sells at a multiple when you are ready to move on. Modest buy-in, maybe $200,000, and at $6,000 a month with the business value climbing as you win more contracts, you reach $1 million in just over 10 years. Slower than the real estate plays because there is no appreciating land, but the sellable business at the end is what carries you across the line. Look at what those 5 have in common. Every single one has something underneath the cash flow: a building, a piece of land, or a book of contracts a buyer will pay for. That is not a coincidence. That is the entire reason they work. So let us go back to that 90%, the number we started with, and put the honest figure next to it. Start with 100 people who buy a boring business. Somewhere around 90 of them are still standing after 5 years. That is the famous number, and it is true. But now keep walking down the path. Of those 90 survivors, maybe 63 are clearing real owner profit, not just breaking even and paying themselves last. Of those, maybe 28 actually hold on and reinvest for 10 years or more instead of selling early or burning out. And of those, maybe 17 genuinely cross $1 million in net worth. 17 out of 100. Now, I want to be completely straight with you about that number, because being straight about numbers is the entire point of this channel. The 90% survival figure comes from real industry data. The 17 does not come from a study. It is a model, built from reasonable assumptions at each step, and depending on how optimistic or pessimistic you are at every stage, the honest range runs from about 9 to about 28. I am not going to pretend it is a hard statistic, because it is not. But somewhere in that band is the truth, and the truth is that the real number is nothing like 90. So both numbers are real. 90% will survive. Something closer to 1 in 6 will actually get rich. The gap between those two is the gap between a business that keeps its doors open and a business that changes your life, and now you know exactly what lives in that gap. An asset. Which brings us back to those three questions. And this is the part I want you to keep long after you have forgotten the specific numbers. The next time anyone shows you a boring business and promises you wealth, run it through the filter yourself. Do customers pay every month on their own, without chasing? Is each decision low drama? And the one that matters most, can you eventually own the asset underneath the cash flow? And will that asset sell for a real multiple when you are done? If the answer to that third question is no, you are not necessarily looking at a bad business. You might be looking at a perfectly good income. But be honest with yourself about which one it is, because an income and an asset are not the same thing, and only one of them is quietly building you $1 million while you sleep. The businesses in the first half of this video passed the easy two and failed the important one. The ones in the second half passed all three. That is the whole difference. Not the industry, not the effort, not the luck, the asset. Now, none of these timelines are fixed. They move, sometimes dramatically, based on your buy-in, your down payment, how much of the cash flow you reinvest, and how much that asset underneath appreciates. Change any one of those, and the year you cross $1 million can shift by a lot. So instead of trusting my scenario, I would rather you run your own. Inside the Wealth Logicians community, there is a tool that lets you drop in your own numbers, your purchase price, your monthly profit, your reinvestment rate, and it shows you your real years to $1 million and how much of that million comes from cash flow versus from the asset itself. It is one of a whole vault of tools our members use to pressure test exactly this kind of decision before they put money down. If that is the way you want to think about wealth with the real math in front of you, come join us in the vault. Here is where I want to leave you. Boring genuinely wins. That part was never the myth. The stability is real, the survival rates are real, and the quiet compounding is real. The myth was only ever the shortcut. The idea that any of this happens fast, or hands off, or without an asset doing the heavy lifting underneath. The people who actually get rich from boring businesses are not the ones who found the cleverest one. They are the ones who bought something with an asset under it, kept their costs low, reinvested for years, and let time do the boring, unglamorous work. No viral moment, no lucky break, just the right structure held for long enough. That is the real math. And now it is yours.